Hello everybody, welcome to DISASTAPEECES, the show where I determine whether or not the worst albums ever are truly the worst albums ever. Today we're discussing an album that to some people sounds like the embodiment of Rebecca Black's Friday and Alison Gold's Chinese food wrapped up into one, but to others sounds like an Avant Garde Masterpiece in the shape of pop to come. Well, it was met mostly with overwhelmingly negative press upon initial release, with the leading singles finally getting up from rock bottom and On My Own frequently being called the worst songs ever by big outlets and YouTube comments alike. It was 2012, and hating on teenagers with auto-tuned voices was kinda everybody's favorite thing to do back then. Of course, a song made by the girl from Teen Mom is gonna get bashed even if it was objectively the greatest song ever. Now, unlike these other teen pop acts that were so hated you couldn't escape it, My Teenage Dream Ended never really hit the same level of popularity as some of the songs made possible by Patrice Wilson, and any mainstream notoriety that it did have was quickly forgotten about. However, over time it's kind of developed a bizarre cult following online that sees it as a genuinely excellent piece of outsider art that predates a lot of what we hear in the modern underground nowadays. Maybe it was partially sparked due to an interview with The Fader in 2017 that revealed a lot of information about how the album was actually made, or even sites like The Guardian and The Atlantic being early to the party and praising the album the year it came out. Regardless of how it achieved such an oddball status as one of the most polarizing and unintentionally disturbing albums of the 21st century, where did this all start? Well, a few select people know Farrah Abraham as the brilliant mind behind chart-topping hits such as Unplanned Parenthood. In real life, people know her from her episode of MTV's 16 and Pregnant in 2009 and appearances in Teen Mom from 2009 all the way up to 2018. Now, this might be a shock for some of you, but I'm actually not a very active member in the Teen Mom subreddit, nor do I spend that much time on the Teen Mom forums, so I don't have the best grasp on which one of these lovely mothers is considered to be the favorite among fans of the show. What I do know is that Farrah Abraham has a pretty unique story from her contemporaries, which makes her notorious, aside from just being kicked off the show for doing the devil's tango on camera, and, well...
If the Earth is a circle, how does the water always stay? Gravity. But the water is a little bit more heavier than gravity. Everything is figure-outable. That is so pretty to me. I love when clouds touch mountains or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, I'm actually gonna rant for a second, but not about what you might think. If you're somebody who's quick to dismiss this record or anything else that somebody like Farrah Abraham, who appears to be really stupid in a reality TV show, does simply based on how they appear in their respective show, then I'm gonna let you in on a secret. It's fake. Just as you're supposed to root against a villain in a drama or laugh at the antics in a comedy, you gawk at Farrah Abraham in Teen Mom because that's the point of the show. Just because it's slapped with the reality TV tag doesn't mean it abides by a different set of rules than any other show, as everything that happens is still very much planned out. Is Farrah Abraham actually as stupid in real life as she appears in this show? I don't know, because I haven't met her personally, but I can't make that assumption just based on a fictionalized version of herself that she plays on TV. And even if everything isn't scripted, you're bound to act differently when a camera's on you, especially when you know it'll be seen by millions of people, so saying that she is playing a character here is in no way a stretch. The only difference is that everything she's gone through, from her mother's abuse to the death of her baby's father, is actually real, which makes turning it into a trashy reality TV show seem all the more predatory. Speaking of which, let's talk about her story. She was just like any other high school girl, getting drunk all the time, hanging out with her girlfriends, flirting with the boys, the usual stuff. Until she met Derek. The two had a pretty rocky relationship throughout high school, constantly breaking up and hooking up with other people to make each other jealous before getting back together and repeating the cycle all over again. And he got her pregnant. After her mom wouldn't let her get rid of the baby, she told a few people about her pregnancy, but never Derek because honestly he was kind of a shitty guy. Her cheerleading coach actually told her that MTV was holding a casting for a show about pregnant teens called 16 and Pregnant, and so she sent them an audition video and bam, she got the job. Now with cameras following her everywhere and rumors all around the school about her pregnancy, Derek probably knew she was pregnant, but was still never directly told that the kid was his, at least not from Farrah. About 8 months into her pregnancy, and while they were still filming the show, Derek got into a car accident, slipping on some black ice on the highway, and unfortunately passed away before ever getting to meet their child. This, combined with the strong emotions that I can only imagine come with being a pregnant high schooler, were pretty traumatic for Farrah, and I don't think anybody can deny that. After giving birth to their daughter Sophia, she started a new life in Florida where she continued to work for MTV on Teen Mom. In August of 2012, around the time the original Teen Mom series went on hiatus, Farrah published an autobiography called My Teenage Dream Ended, perhaps a play on Katy Perry's Teenage Dream, and alongside this autobiography came the reason I'm making this video. One of the producers who worked on Teen Mom, named Frederick M. Cuevas, also happened to be an aspiring music producer. One day, about 4 or 5 months into his work on the show, Farrah brought up her adoration for Minecraft YouTuber intro type beats and asked him if he could produce something for her that sounded similar to Cinema by Benny Benassi. He was hesitant to take on the project as he had never produced a full-length album professionally before and was nervous about messing it up, but ultimately decided to go for it. After all, it's become very common for young actors and reality TV stars to try and branch out with a music career, and while the vast majority have failed completely, we still have Drake and Ariana Grande. I mean, they weren't on reality shows, but close enough. Frederick sent Farrah a couple of tracks to give her an idea of the sound and something she could write lyrics over, but she had actually already written all of the album's lyrics prior, and let me tell you, Cinema by Benny Benassi is probably the last song I would ever think of after reading Searching for Closure. Frederick tried to match the album's bleaker moments with sad piano tracks and an overall edgier sound than a lot of contemporary electropop at the time, but making an album that deals with such serious subjects while still trying to have a mainstream sound in the same year as Gangnam Style is not the easiest thing in the world. When it came time to record, Farrah refused to listen to the actual music and sing over it because I guess she was nervous it would come out sounding the way it did, so the producer just gave her a metronome to match the tempo of each track and let her sing over it however she wanted to. And whatever, it's fine. Half these pop stars don't have any talent and it's all fixed in post anyway. It's not like I'm on a time crunch and have to get the album finished in time for the release of an autobiography or something like that. Oh wait. Wait, did she really not hear the music before singing over it? I would have never guessed. So I actually went ahead and read the entire autobiography myself because I wanted to be as thorough as possible for this video. And as a standalone product, I really cannot recommend it. There's a lot of kind of unnecessary details here and there, and the exposition's all kind of sloppy and messed up, and not to mention there's like commas where there shouldn't be. It's a pretty short book. I actually got through the whole thing in only a couple days. But a lot of the chapters are just filler stories of her and Derek breaking up and then getting back together all over again. What is interesting, though, is that all the songs on the album are actually named after chapters in the book. And the chapters in the book kind of give context to the lyrics in the songs. So if you are like a diehard fan of this album, then, I mean, first of all, you should probably get therapy. But if you do want to read this just for the sake of context, then you should probably just stick to the chapters that the songs are named after, and maybe a few more. If I think of some important ones, I'll put them on screen. I will say, though, that I am kind of disappointed that there's not a song on the album called The Crotch Incident, or, Dude, There's a Hair in My Taco. Yeah, I think that's enough context for now. On to the music.
Are we together or apart? Because this is a new start.
So it doesn't take a lot of listens to realize that the genre of this album is made by a 20-year-old who had a kid 3 years prior and was thrust into a reality TV show about it where she met a guy who produced music for fun, but she only wanted to sing over a metronome instead of the actual music core. But how does it compare to other albums in that genre? Oh wait, it's the only one? Damn it! Well, if I had to make any comparisons, it certainly sounds like it's trying to be a pop album from 2012 with the dubstep bass drops, booming synths, and auto-tuned vocals, but it takes all of these elements and throws them together with very little rhyme or reason. The Phone Call That Changed My Life, for example, which happens to be the first song on the album, spends most of its time repeating this very cheap and poorly mixed bass drop alongside these sad synth chords, but it doesn't really follow any type of clear progression or structure. There's no hook, no instrumental build-ups, and the vocals kind of just come and go whenever, with the only moment of vague clarity being this bridge where the instrumental quiets down to let the lyrics ring out more. Speaking of the vocals, Farrah sounds extremely raw and vulnerable all throughout this record, despite the abundant use of autotune. In fact, the way it's used on here, it doesn't really sound like an attempt to make her voice more on key or even to make a vocal melody sound more coherent, although I'm sure that was the intention. Rather, it comes across more as an aesthetic choice, as a lot of pop music from that era used autotune as an intentional part of the sound. Hell, I'd even go as far as to say that given the context of the album, it's similar to Kanye's 808s and Heartbreak in the way autotune is used as a means of distancing the artist both from the audience and from their own emotions. I know it kind of sounds like I've been ripping on this opening track for being a total mess, and yes, believe me, it is a total mess, but I think it works considering what the song is trying to convey. You can probably guess based on the title, but The Phone Call That Changed My Life refers to her friend calling her on the phone the morning after Derek's passing to tell her what had happened, and I think the lack of structure and unpredictability of the song mirrors the frantic mind state that Farrah was in immediately after hearing the news. This is the very first chapter in the book as well, and even though the actual narrative doesn't start here, it acts as a good overture, at least in the album. The book kind of sucks. After Prom is slightly more conventional than the first track, mostly sticking to this one synth loop that, when combined with the kick drum, makes for a beat that's punchy, but sanitary as all hell. Seriously, in any other context, this instrumental would sound like a generic dance pop track, but because it's on the Teen Mom album, you know that's not the case. The fact that Farrah didn't actually listen to the music while recording her vocals becomes very apparent here, as it sounds like she's singing karaoke to a song she's never heard before and is just trying to read the lyrics on screen and fit them into the instrumental. It's for that reason that I strongly encourage all of my karaoke bar employee viewers to add this song to the playlist. I'm sure it would go over beautifully. The after prom chapter in the book details her and Derek mating for the first time, and she doesn't want anyone to find out about it, which explains the chorus. Given the prom theme of the track, the dancier instrumental is fitting, even if the lyrics are seemingly a bunch of nothing and there's a good chance that some of these are incorrect anyway because they're hard to make out, but it definitely gives off the feeling of being way too drunk and paranoid at a party, with the quieter chorus illustrating the regret afterwards. Isn't it beautiful what rushed mixing, recycled vocals, and cheap production can do? Caught in the Act, as you can maybe guess from the title, is based on a scene where her and Derek are, Foxtrot uniform Charlie Kiloing, and her dad wakes up in the middle of the night, and I bet he wishes he didn't. This is one of the few songs where you can actually gather this whole story with just the lyrics, as vague as they may be. Although in the book, only her dad was home, and in the song she says,
My parents are asleep.
Sleep.
I mean, I guess her mom might have been asleep too while she was out of town, and it sounds better than saying, my father is asleep, or something like that, but if nobody else is going to point out this very small continuity error in the Teen Mom book / album combo, then I will, damn it! Musically, this song has probably the hardest dubstep bass drop on the album, and while I would like to be all artsy music nerd and say something like,
It communicates the intensity of the situation by sounding like a heart that's beating super quickly out of shock and fear.
But no, it really just sounds silly. Like, for real, I know I made a joke earlier about Minecraft YouTuber intros, but I can totally picture one to this song. In contrast to track 3, Without This Ring is a little more stripped back, with this sad piano arpeggio that sounds ripped straight out of an Evanescence song, and some airy synths and kick drums that give it a bit of texture. Farrah's vocals are a little more on-beat than usual, and the overall melancholy of the track makes it feel like the first true moment of realization on the album, even if the lyrics are just based on this stupid scene where Derek gives Farrah a ring to try to get her back, and she just gives it back to him. That being said, I think this track can be looked at as the centerpiece to the album, as it feels like Farrah is beginning to come to terms with her loss while still very much dwelling on the recent event. The music conveys this too in the way it balances a sad melody with a slightly more upbeat rhythm. It's obvious based on this song and the next track that this is the point in the album where the producer actually heard the lyrics and realized what the theme of the record was going to be, so he threw together some sad sounding music to match. And while it kind of works on Without This Ring, it's a little more awkward on Liar Liar. This track is focused on a simple, if not meandering guitar riff that pretty much just repeats and leaves all the song progression to this string part that sounds way too gargantuan to be turning up on the Teen Mom album. Seriously, I don't know what's funnier, hearing Farrah try to keep up with the stereotypically overblown dubstep on Caught in the Act, or hearing her sing over the goddamn Chicago Symphony Orchestra here. The song isn't even about Derek's death so much as it is their relationship troubles when he was alive, so I guess you can laugh at the song and not feel as bad about it. In all seriousness though, it actually does have some of the best mixing on the album, with the vocals probably syncing up more seamlessly here than anywhere else, and all the different layers coming together pretty naturally with each moment of musical progression. Still though, when people consider this to be a so bad it's good album, tracks like this one make me understand that sentiment, but perhaps not more so than Unplanned Parenthood. This song goes back to the bass-heavy dance pop sound of the first few tracks, but is maybe even more off-kilter than all of them. Something about the weird bass line that dominates most of the mix aside from the vocals, for a good portion of the track at least, makes the whole thing sound like it's coming out of a broken speaker, but not in the sense that it's lo-fi or anything like that. The vocal cadences on this track are so strange that they go beyond anything the producer could have possibly done to fix them, even with the heavier vocal effects that come later in the track. Lyrically, it's about Farrah realizing she's pregnant. In fact, on the Apple Music version of the album, it's literally called Pregnant, but considering the circumstances, the more upbeat tone of the track doesn't really fit. I mean, granted, the instrumental, and especially the vocals, are even weirder than usual, and maybe it's meant to sound that way because she's trying to stay optimistic in the midst of realizing her life is never going to be the same, and it is actually pretty entertaining just for how absurd it is, but it's a bit of a strange choice nonetheless. It kind of makes sense though, as the tracklist had to be in a specific order to match the chapters in the book, and we already got 2 sad sounding songs in a row, so they gotta get a balance going. Oh wait, Searching for Closure actually comes after On My Own in the book? Well, me. Although actually, replacing the order of these two tracks kind of gives new meaning to On My Own, as in the book it's about Farrah realizing she's going to be taking care of their child without Derek because they're broken up, but putting it after Searching for Closure means she'll be on her own because he is no longer with us. I guess Mr. Frederick M. Cuevas thought that it would be more dramatic if it referred to the latter, but he kind of shot himself in the foot because On My Own is easily the worst song here. The instrumental sounds straight up unfinished, with this half-baked synth lead that sounds cheaper and thinner than a toothpick, and a barely existent bass line and kick drum that isn't even close to sounding properly mixed. It's so close to sounding like a real pop song, but because it was so poorly made, I seriously can't imagine how anyone would even go about performing over it in the first place, which ironically makes Farrah's vocals sound slightly more natural. I don't know, maybe the super disjointedness of everything going on gives it a more vivid emotional display than it would have had otherwise, especially coming after the semi-attempt at a serious piano ballad on Searching for Closure, but this sounds like the most rushed song on the entire album. However, if you thought this record was weird or freakish or unsettling now, then nothing, and I mean nothing, can prepare you for these last two tracks. Songs that are so cursed and unholy that Apple wouldn't even dare allow them to enter their streaming service. I'm hesitant to even play a clip of it for you because once I do, you'll never be able to get it out of your head, and also I run the risk of getting claimed. But because I love you guys, and I know I've made you curious, here's a couple seconds of each.
Parties, drinks, flowing, endless money, keep it going.
You terrified yet? Seriously, at this point it's almost like the producer just said, screw it, the whole album's a shit show anyway, let's just go full on experimental and scare away the 4 people that are still listening. You know, despite being the most blatantly disjointed and incoherent track on the album, The Sunshine State comes across as the most fully conceived idea musically. The way the dancey instrumental undergoes numerous change-ups in the span of a minute and 45 seconds matches the weirdly dispersed but also numb and lifeless delivery that Farrah gives throughout the entire track. It feels deliberately made to sound uncomfortable and off the wall as opposed to just being stitched together as such, and it's a genuinely exciting track overall. That just leaves Finally Getting Up from Rock Bottom, which is the most aggressive on the album with its harsh vocal effects, booming drums, and a simple but gritty synth lead. It's definitely a change of pace, and given the theme of coming back up from the trauma that she had experienced throughout the album, it's a pretty satisfying ending that winds up sounding hopeful and determined. I also think that the way the vocal effects are used here make her vocals sound a little more natural in context of the music than maybe anywhere else on the album, which is probably why they chose to release it as one of the lead singles. In fact, it's actually probably the most accessible song on here, and because of that, it makes me wonder how these people would react if they heard anything else from the album. My Teenage Dream Ended has certainly earned its status as an outsider pop oddity and one of the strangest albums of the 2010s. Something I hear a lot when this record is brought up is comparisons to artists like 100 Gex, Dorian Electra, or Sophie, who are currently paving the way for new trends in modern music, and this album is more or less a precursor to that whole scene. If you ask me though, I kinda just see that as a coincidence and not really a reason for why I hold this album in as high regard as I do. I mean, given the absurdity of 100 Gex music, it's certainly possible that they've heard this album and were inspired by it in some way, but I don't think they've acknowledged it outside of this tongue-in-cheek tweet responding to the comparisons. If you were to remove this album from existence, then I don't think much about the current landscape would change, but it is interesting to hear an album that, whether intentional or not, was pretty ahead of its time. Is it an avant garde masterpiece? Well, no, I still think it's a flawed album, even if you are willing to overlook the obvious, but I think the emotional display that it gives off is genuinely haunting. I know some people who are absolutely creeped out by this thing because the strange vocals, familiar music, and static cover art come together in this very uncanny valley way that's hard to forget about once you've heard it. Well, it never really got under my skin in the same way that other albums have. I find it to be such a fascinating piece of media that I can't help but appreciate it. I placed it at number 72 in my top 108 favorite albums of the decade video, and I still stand by this, as even though there are moments I don't care for, it's still a pretty significant record for me personally. I don't know if I'm gonna end up saying this about any other album that I cover in this series, but My Teenage Dream Ended gets a recommendation from me, and if it gives you nightmares or you just think it's really obnoxious, then I can't blame you, but it seems to hit everybody differently. Let me know your thoughts on this album in the comments, or other disaster pieces I should cover in the future. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed, you know the drill.
No more breath in my hair, or ladies' underwear.